Hello, can you hear me? Tony Mom, text something if you can hear me. Hello? We are live. Nobody can hear me? I'm not sure whether the stream is working. Hello? I see on YouTube the video is up, but I'm not sure whether you can hear my voice. Can someone just tag something into chat to test whether we are working? 他最好上，最好上。那你也没叫我。We are live. Okay, great. Finally, someone told me that it's working. So I know it has been a while. So today we are continuing to discuss something about multi-word verbs. So let's start with where we were left off. So last time we discussed multiple patterns of multi-word verbs. A very difficult question in English, especially for foreign learners, is that when you have a verb that is followed by a little word, technically we call particle, the combination of the verb and that little word can mean many things. And even for native speakers, it's always difficult to figure out exactly what that combination is. So there are several scenarios. One is that word is actually an adverb after that major verb, and the combination has some fixed meaning, like an idiom. The other possibility is that the little word, the particle, is actually a preposition. So the combination is still a combined fixed usage. You cannot treat that preposition separately. For example, if we say, we look at that person. When you have that add, look at, is actually a kind of fixed combination. And then a third possibility is that when you have a preposition after the major verb, that preposition is more just associated with the noun after it, rather than associated with the verb. So in that case, we call that a free combination. And then there's some combination like I look forward to, which is quite a mix of two scenarios where look forward to is a three-word combination, while the second word, forward, is an adverb, but to is really a preposition. However, we always use those three together. It's idiom-like usage, but technically you can think about look forward is adverb combined with the verb, while to is actually preposition. That's quite confusing. So with all those kinds of possibilities, a lot of people never know what they are dealing with. But if you don't have a clear understanding of all those different possibilities, you will end up, you cannot really tell when you write, you cannot tell what exactly you are doing. So that's a quite just a confusing situation. So today we continue from last time. Let's just look at those two sentences. The king looked up the word. The king looked the word up. The two sentences actually mean exactly the same thing. And look up here is actually an idiomatic usage. Okay, so up here has no meaning of something like the original meaning of up. Up meaning upward, right? Or on top of something. But here, look up really means like you try to search in a dictionary, look up the word. So look up is really an idiom. It's a phrasal verb. Look up is a phrase and it's a fixed, customized just usage for something meaning search the word in a dictionary. But very interestingly, for this particular one, we can actually move up around. So when we say the king looked the word up, it actually means exactly the same thing as the king look up the word. But up can move around because it's actually an adverb. We know usually adverb can somehow move around. So that's why for this phrasal verb, you can say either way. And because of that, when we diagram this or those two sentences, you only have one diagram for both. Because up is right after the one. But if we say something like the king look up the word in that sentence, compare this sentence with the very first one we just looked at. What is the difference now? Now we have an actual prepositional phrase. Look up the word in that sentence. How does this change the meaning of the original sentence? Well, here in that sentence, we know this is a prepositional phrase. And it's right after the word in that sentence. So this prepositional phrase in that sentence serves as an adjective, modifying the word, telling us which word we are talking about. The king look up the word in that sentence. Not any given word, but the word in that sentence. So how do we diagram this sentence? Well, it just expands the current diagram we are looking at, which is right here. The king look up the word, but the word now has one more modifier in that sentence. Therefore, the diagram should look like this. The king look up the word in that sentence. Okay, can we still move around this up? Say, the king look the word in that sentence up? No. The reason is that if you compare to the second sentence above, up, when we move around up is right after the word. It cannot go too far away from the word. So if we say, the king looked the word in that sentence up, because of this in that sentence, up is too away from word. And that broke this pattern, and it doesn't make sense. Nobody says the king looked the word in that sentence up. But can we say the king looked the word up in that sentence? It's also problematic Because if we put up right after word, this in that sentence will get separated from the word, and that also breaks the typical way you use a prepositional phrase after a noun to modify it. So we face a dilemma. We only have one possibility to put something right after the word, and in this case you have two candidates. One is up, one is in that sentence. You cannot satisfy both. So therefore, in this case, you cannot move up. Okay. Now, if we have this sentence, the king looked up the word in the dictionary. Think carefully and compare this sentence to the previous one. What does the sentence mean now? You may think this sentence logically is very similar to the previous one. In the dictionary, just like in that sentence, modified word, we mean a word in the dictionary and the king look up that word, maybe in another dictionary. That doesn't really make sense, right? So what this sentence really means is that the king look up the word, and where this lookup function is performed, it's in the dictionary. And that fits perfectly with the meaning of lookup, because we know lookup is actually an action. You grab a dictionary and look up a word, trying to find the meaning of that word from the dictionary. So in the dictionary, in this case, it's really modifying lookup, where to perform the lookup action. Therefore, this in the dictionary also a prepositional phrase. It's an adverbial prepositional phrase. It really modifies lookup. So that's how this diagram should look at. So you can see that all those sentences kind of similar to each other, but you wouldn't have any problem to understand them correctly just because the cosmetic usage of lookup and the prepositional phrase comes so natural to you, but technically they look so similar. And this cannot be the case if you don't understand what lookup means. And in this case, in the last example, in the dictionary, lookup work quite naturally. Okay, but technically, the sentence is structurally very different. Okay, so that's how this issue can potentially be very confusing. Okay, so now let's have some discussion on how we test a given multi-word verb. So a very first one, usually this goes without notice, whether the combination has an idiomatic meaning. And this is typically what we call phrasal verbs. You have a phrase and it has an idiomatic meaning. It's just that it's part of your vocabulary. You know its meaning. You don't have to think about anything. It just comes so naturally. It's just like any other single word in the dictionary. It has a very specific fixed meaning. And typically, we will talk about shortly. In those cases, that little word after the verb, that particle, does not have the literal meaning of that word typically in the dictionary. So for example, the lookup we just looked at, up in that combination has no common association with the original meaning or typical meaning of up. Lookup is just searching a word typically in the dictionary, but it has nothing to do with something that has an up connotation. Okay? Now, a very good test is whether that a particle movement is possible. If you can move this around, say look it up, look up it, then that up is definitely an adverb. Okay? And in that case, you have a phrasal verb. Another test is whether a WH question is formed. What we mean by that is there are different kind of WH questions: who, where, and so on, what. So a very good test about the transitional prepositional verb. So we are talking about two scenarios. One is that you have a transitive verb, it's followed by a preposition, and that combination makes further a verb that must be followed by a noun. That's why you have an object of that. And another possibility is a free combination of a verb, but it's followed by a prepositional look like, but it's actually an adverbial prepositional phrase. Okay, so let's get some examples how we use this WH question test. So if you have a prepositional verb, the question you want to ask for that particular sentence is typically with a what or who. What means an object, right? Who means a person. So the associated question you want to ask is this a question like this: what are you talking about? What are you laughing at? I'm talking about laughing at something. So think about the second part of the example. I'm talking about something. I'm laughing at something. In this case, the about and at must be followed by a noun. Talk about something. Laugh at something or someone. So if you want to convert this sentence into a question format, what word you should start with the question sentence? It's either what or who. Why? Because this is a prepositional verb, so it's followed by a noun right after that. And if the question is toward that object, because we know it's an object, it's a noun, so your question statement must start with either a what or who, because the question is toward this object that is after the preposition. Okay, so this is a good test to tell whether this is object after the preposition. Similarly here, I'm working with talking to somebody. Again, this is now is a person instead of an object, but it's still the same logical pattern, working with somebody, talking to somebody. So your question will go like, who are you working with or talking to? Once again, your question is toward that object after the preposition. So you need either a what or who. In contrast, if you have a free combination case, your question will start with typically either something like where or when. Why is that? Because your question is toward adverbial thing. So let's take a look at example. We will meet at that place. Meet at. Do you see the difference between this structure meet at and laugh at or talk to? You cannot think about meet at is kind of a prepositional verb that it must be followed by a noun. So we will meet at that place. In this case, at is part of a prepositional phrase. Rather than say meet at logically serves as a transitive verb, it needs to be followed by a noun. In other words, if you look at laugh at or talk to, that little word at or to is associated with the verb rather than the noun. Laugh at logically is one unit. It serves as a transitive verb and it needs to be followed by a noun. Same thing to talk about or talk to or work as. They are all followed by a noun, which is the object of the verb. So in this case, you have to think about that little word about or at or with or to is glued to the verb. In contrast, when you say meet at that place, at is not glued to meet. Instead, at is glued to the noun that after it, at that place, which is a prepositional phrase. And this prepositional phrase serves as an adverb modifying meet. So we will meet at that place. Clearly, you feel that at that place must go as a group, rather than we will meet at that place. Do you see that difference? So in this case, if you want to ask a question toward that place, you will not say, what will we meet at? You will never ask that type of question, right? That's exactly because this is not a prepositional verb. This is a free combination. Your question is toward the whole thing at that place rather than that place. Therefore, your question will look like, where will we meet? It's toward this whole thing at that place. It's an adverb. Therefore, your question starts with where. Very subtle difference, but it's important to understand why logically they are very different. Okay, so similarly, when are you leaving? I'm leaving at that time. You will not think at is combined with leave. We'll leave at something. No, it's not that. We'll leave at that time. And that time together as a group serves a grammatic function, which is an adverb. When will we leave? When will I leave? I'm leaving at that time. So your question in this case is not toward that time, but toward at that time. Therefore, you ask, when are you leaving? Okay? So you can see the difference between those two cases. You have a verb, you have little word, which is essentially a preposition. It's also followed by a noun. The true question is that how will this at be viewed? Is it combined with the noun after it or combined with the verb before it? If it's combined with the word before it, then this is a prepositional verb. If it's combined with the noun after it, then that's a prepositional phrase. So the logic is really that simple to see how that little word is combined with either the word before it, which is a verb, or the noun after it, which is a prepositional phrase. So you can see that why you need to have a very logical mind when you analyze this kind of thing. It's truly kind of mathematical thing. Okay? Now, let's talk about something we call reflective pronouns. Okay. The king sees himself now. The king sees himself now. Himself, we know it's a reflective pronoun. It typically has two uses. But what exactly does himself, which is a pronoun, refer to? We know pronoun, it's a nickname for a noun. It's pointer. It points to something. So logically, it's the same as noun. In this case, the king sees himself. So himself refers back to the king, which is subject. That's exactly why it's a reflective pronoun, because this word means the subject itself. So we have to use himself to stress that this is actually the same person as the subject. But in this sentence, the king sees himself, so himself is the object of the verb sees. So this is a very straightforward sentence. The diagram is very easy. But now, if we change the verb to seems, think about this. What is seems? What kind of verb is this? Well, is this a transitive verb where himself is the object of the transitive verb? It cannot be. We know seems is not transitive verb. We don't have anything like a seems something. So seems is a linking verb. Okay, so now you see the diagram for the first one. The king sees himself. This is straightforward. You have a transitive verb, see something. You have see an object, a noun. So himself is a pronoun. It's a pointer to a person. This person happens to be the subject itself. So sees himself. Now, king seems himself now. Seems here is not a transitive verb. It's a linking verb. Remember which pattern is this? You have a linking verb. It's followed by a noun. So therefore, the diagram is really himself goes back to king. We know that. This is how this linking verb works. So it's very different in terms of structure between those two sentences, because the meaning dictates that one is a straightforward subject, verb, and object. But here seems is truly a linking verb. Okay, so it's very important to recognize that seems self is another just a name for the king. Okay, and the king seems self. That means that the king acts or behaves just like himself, and just like a king. That's what this sentence means. So you see that this reflective pronoun himself can actually serve a very different grammatical role in such cases. Adverbial adjective. Well, this is a really difficult one. Adverbial adjective. So what is that? Recall that I will go to the zoo tomorrow. Tomorrow is something here we call adverbial adjective. This is a very kind of just a difficult grammar point. Tomorrow, a word like tomorrow typically is a noun. But over time, it has gained an adverb meaning. When I studied grammar many years ago, we used the British just textbooks and the system from the UK. Well, English started at UK, right? So not surprisingly, but typically our teachers taught us that when you have just a date that serves an adverb, you always want to add a preposition on before that date. On Tuesday, things like that. You have a certain date, you want to use just give a time as an adverb, you always want to use on a certain day, in a certain month or year, to use those prepositions to clearly indicate your modification. But later, I have learned you have a lot of modification like next week, tomorrow, those kind of time-based modification where you don't see any preposition before it. So there's nothing like on next Tuesday. So what's happening here is that I will go to the zoo tomorrow. Tomorrow here serves as an adverb, but it's a simplified version of a prepositional phrase on tomorrow. Okay, this one is even more telling. Friday. Friday is absolutely a noun. It's not an adverb at all. It's just a date, a Friday, right? It cannot be argued it's an adverb. However, we say and write this all the time. I will go to the zoo Friday. So is that grammatically incorrect? You should say, I will go to the zoo on Friday. If you write, I will go to the zoo on Friday, that's absolutely correct. Because that's how standard English should look like. I will go to the zoo on Friday. There's no question about it. That is correct. Because you have a Friday, which is a noun, you say on Friday, and together that serves as adverb when I will go to the zoo. However, in this case, it has become also correct to say, I will go to the zoo Friday. And why is that? So this is a very confusing grammar point, but most people never know what we are talking about here. This Friday is something we call an adverbial adjective. So it's really just, it has become just idiomatic to say it this way. Friday actually serves as an adverb here. But what it's really happening is that it should be on Friday. In that case, Friday is the object of this preposition on, but we drop it. it's idiomatic. So that's why we call this adverbial objective. This term is weird, but it really tells us that, first of all, this is the adverbial thing. Friday is an adverbial modifier. On the other hand, logically, Friday is the object of this preposition on, which is omitted all the way here. So I will go to the zoo on Friday. Friday is the object here, but we drop it, and it becomes a single word which looks like a noun, but it's actually grammatically it's a adverb. So I will go to zoo Friday, and we call this adverbial objective. And there are many different types of or different forms of adverbial objective, but you have to really understand what you are dealing with. I work 3 hours. Now, if I ask you, how do you diagram these sentences? It looks like I work 3 hours. 3 hours, you cannot possibly argue hour is an adverb, right? Hour is absolutely a noun. So therefore, 3 hours cannot possibly make sense in this sentence if you think you have a subject, you have a verb, you have a noun after that verb. Therefore, the noun must be the object of this transitive verb, work. But actually, work here is not transitive verb because it does not take hours as its object. So what's happening here is that 3 hours as a noun, it has been used as an adverb. But the real thing you should realize that it's actually a medium version for 3 hours. I worked for 3 hours. For 3 hours is a prepositional phrase serving as an adverb modify work. Therefore, if you diagram oral sentences, you should realize that although you do not have that preposition before your noun, you should think just like that. So, I will go to the zoo tomorrow. Tomorrow here, you just use it as if it's an adverb. Okay, so it directly go beneath go. It's modifying this action, go. Same thing for Friday, but this is even more explicit. The reason you look at this is that if you actually open up the dictionary, if you type tomorrow, you will see it has actually over years, tomorrow logically is just a noun. But it has again an adverb meaning. So in the dictionary, tomorrow is actually listed as an adverb. But this is only because our language has evolved in a way, originally a word that only has a noun meaning. Over time, it has officially gained an adverb meaning. Therefore, when you diagram this first sentence, you directly use it as an adverb. But Friday does not have this just privilege. If you type Friday, it's just a straightforward noun. It has no adverb meaning whatsoever, right? Friday is just a day in the week. So how can it be an adverb? It cannot. It's just simply a noun, period. But in this sentence, which is actually used the same way, go to the zoo tomorrow, go to the Friday. what you should really say is, I will go to the zoo on Friday. But since now we all accept it, you can say, I will go to the zoo Friday. So grammatically, to make sense of that, we really know we are actually dropping on before Friday and converting this adverbial prepositional phrase into adverbial objective. So, therefore, your diagram should look like something like this. This is a prepositional phrase, just without that on, but it's not an adverb, so you won't diagram it this way. It still use a prepositional phrase diagram, but just without that on right there. So that way you can tell yourself this is the adverb or adverbial, but you don't have that preposition in that prepositional phrase. Okay. I work 3 hours. Same thing. I work for 3 hours, which is a prepositional phrase modifying work, but you don't have that for. So therefore, you just diagram it as this Friday. Okay? So there are other kinds of adverbial object. So let's take a look. I went home. This is very important and very confusing point. If I ask people, how do you think, what's the grammatical structure of this sentence? I went home. A lot of people will think that when, which is go, it's a transitive verb here, where home is the object of this transitive verb. But if you think carefully, that's the wrong answer. Go home. Go as a verb, it does not take home as an object. If you think carefully, this doesn't make sense whatsoever. Go home. How can home be an object of action like a go? Go, in this case, is an intransitive verb. It does not take an object as the receiver as this action. Go is just an action that I perform, I walk, which does not need an object. But why do we say go home? And home logically is just a place. It's just a noun, right? But just like go to the zoo tomorrow, here home is adverbial objective. It's a noun, but now in this case, it has an adverb meaning. And actually over time, just like tomorrow, if you see home, it has also gained an adverb meaning. This is because home is such a common word, we use it so frequently, and we use this in sentences like this. So over time, it has gained an adverb meaning. But originally, it surely started just as a noun, right? Think about it. Home is just a place. That's a noun. So I went home. Home here is an adverb. Tells us the direction of this action, go. Where did I go? I went home. Okay? I did it the new way. This is a better example than home for us to understand. Way here is also a noun. The new way, it clearly shows that it's a noun because it's modified by new, a new way, right? The new way. It's modified by adjective. Remember, adjective can only modify a noun. or noun equivalent. So the new way as a whole thing, there's no argument. The new way, we are talking about a noun. But I did it, then modified by a noun. How can we do that? It's because this is an adverbial objective. It's a noun, but it has been used as an adverb. It tells us the manner I did it, in which way I did it. I did it the new way. So that's, you can say grammarians made this up to explain a phenomenon that will not make sense otherwise. You can say that. So they came up with this idea. We call something like this an adverbial objective. So therefore, you say I did the new way, just like home, is an adverb modifying the main verb do. So the same thing in the next one. I awake at the same time every morning. What is morning? Morning is just a certain moment in a day. It's a noun. But every morning, so you can see a lot of such words has a meaning for certain time. They have been used this way. Adverbial objective. Next week, next year, all those things have the same grammatical structure every morning. So every morning here is an adverbial objective, tells us at what time, but morning itself is a noun. Okay, so I went home. You want, the diagram here is a little bit interesting. You can diagram this way, or you just use a straightforward backward slash, because home has been officially listed as an adverb in the dictionary. This is a little bit kind of just still treating home as a noun. Okay, so either way is fine, but this gives you, it's kind of stressing the fact that this is an adverbial objective. Okay, same thing here. The new way technically is a noun, but here it's an adverbial. But you still notice that we treat this as in the new way. We did it in the new way. You just drop that in. Okay. Remember why we call this objective? Because logically you have a preposition before that, but we just drop it. So I did it the new way. Awake at the same time. That's the first prepositional phrase, modifying the main verb, awake. But every morning is another one, modifying the time. So I'm sorry, modifying the awake. So every morning. Okay, so on every morning. The on is simply omitted. Okay, so all these are kind of just very subtle, but if you do not understand the grammatical structure, you will really get confused why we have this. We say this all the time, but it doesn't make sense grammatically to me. What is going on? Then you will know this is a special phenomena. The grammarians try to make sense of this, so they coin this term adverbial objective to make sense of it. Okay. Well, you have the case of kind of tiered modifiers. You have a modifier, then you have another modifier modifying this modifier. Okay. The case of modifier modifying another modifier. So let's consider this. My uncle's book made him a celebrity. Okay, think about my uncles. He's a possessive modifier, right? But if you look at uncle, it already has my. My is an adjective pronoun. So technically, it's an adjective, but we typically put it into a pronoun family. It's adjective pronoun. So what's happening here is that you have two levels of possessive. The book is owned by uncle, uncle's book. But whose uncle? My uncle. So you have two tiers of possessive here. My uncle's book. The diagram should be first, book is the subject. Book made him a celebrity. But uncles is the first level of modifier, modifying book. It's possessive, okay? It serves as adjective. But whose uncle? My uncle. So my modifies uncle. So we have a modifier here. The team play very competitively. So in this case, you have play. But think about very competitively. What is that? It's just two levels of modifier. Competitively, of course, it's adverb. It can only modify play. You can say the team play competitively. That's okay. But if you say the team play very competitively, what does very modify? Very is an adverb. It further modifies another adverb, which is competitively. So the diagram looks like this. The team play very competitively. Adverb modifying another adverb. Recall that we say that an adverb can only modify three things. Only is an exaggeration because three is already a big number. You only have 8 parts of speech. What are those three? An adverb can modify a verb. Perhaps that's why we say adverb. Adverb. An adverb can modify an adjective, usually adding degrees of the meaning of adjective. Very beautiful. And it can also modify another adverb, just like here, very competitively. You don't have too many of those adverbs, but we do have quite some. Okay, so very competitively. The surgeon performed extremely delicate operation. So delicate modified operation, but we want to add certain just information about delicate. How delicate? We know it's delicate, but we want to emphasize that this is extremely delicate. So therefore, extremely is adverb. It's modifying adjective, which is delicate. So you have, once again, you have two levels of modifier. The surgeon performed the operation extremely delicate operation. Okay, those are easier to understand. So the next topic is compound structures. Okay. Review that what is a clause. A clause is just grammatical structure. You need a subject and a verb. A single simple sentence is technically also a clause. It's just a single clause sentence. You only have one sentence, one clause. That's the simple sentence. So you need a subject and a verb to make it a clause or simple sentence. But when we have complex sentences, then you have a main clause, which is we call independent sentence, which contains a subject and verb expressing a complete idea. a clause must complete the idea. So if you only have a simple sentence, of course, because it's a simple sentence, it only has one clause, but still, that's an independent clause. So it's a simple sentence standing alone. It's a single clause sentence standing alone. That's the simple sentence. Now, when we have a complex sentence, you have not only a main clause or independent clause, you must have at least one dependent clause. Or we also call that subordinate clause because it's not the main clause. So, but because it's a clause, it's still a structure that needs a subject and a verb. The difference is that as a subordinate clause, it does not express a complete idea, usually due to the connector that connects this dependent clause to the independent clause. Because of that connector, it cannot be viewed as completing a complete idea. Okay. This is a no-brainer. A simple sentence just contains only one clause, therefore that's one independent clause. However, this is why we want to discuss this. That doesn't mean that the simple sentence cannot have some compound structure. Okay, what we mean by that? A compound structure is a, compound thing. Compound subject, compound verb, compound direct object, and so on. Compound prepositional phrase, or some other similar grammatical structures. So what is that? Let's think about this. Mr. Brown owns a bookstore. His son manages it. Those are two sentences, right? The first sentence talk about owning a bookstore, and the second sentence talk about the son managing it. But those two otherwise independent sentences, we can combine them into one sentence. Mr. Brown and his own own a bookstore. In this case, Mr. Brown and his son form a compound subject. How many subjects here? Of course, it's just one subject. Why? Because it's just one clause. It's a simple sentence. You only have one subject and one verb, of course. But here, Mr. Brown and his son sounds like two people, but yes, that's true. You have two people, but due to this compound structure, logically, it's still a single subject. A single subject, two people, no problem. Because the subject is simply a compound structure, which tells you you have two people. But as a grammar issue, it's a single subject. Okay. Mr. Brown and his son own and manage a bookstore. Now you can see that we are actually combining the original two sentences. However, the meaning is kind of different because you put too much information together. So logically, in the first example, Mr. Brown owns a bookstore. It does not tell that he actually also manages it. On the other hand, his son manages it. It doesn't tell that the son actually has any financial interest or ownership of the store. He merely just has a job as a manager that manages the book. Therefore, in this case, this compound version makes it quite murky, right? What does this sentence exactly tell us? Mr. Brown and his son own and manages a bookstore. So literally, if you put this into a legal document, it must be interpreted that both persons are co-owner and co-managers of the bookstore. They share the financial interest and also share the just a day-to-day management responsibilities. So, but technically, this sentence is still a simple sentence, despite the fact that you have two subjects and they perform two actions, because this is a compound, just a predicate, own and manage it, but it doesn't mean that you have two actions or two verbs. It's just still, yes, you do have two verbs, but logically, it's just single verb for the sentence. Okay, the two must go together, own and manage. So if you diagram it, you will see that. Now, we extend this and make it even more complicated. Mr. Brown and his son own and manage a bookstore and a coffee shop. Of course, this is kind of artificial. We have this sentence make it so just kind of confusing. Not really confusing, but just that it doesn't seem like that's actually the case. Somehow we dump all the information into one sentence, but if you have to read this sentence literally, both people own and manage two businesses. One is a bookstore, one is a coffee shop. So if you read literally, this sentence must mean both people both own and manage both a bookstore and a coffee shop. So they are the co-owner of two businesses and then they're co-managers of two businesses. If you don't mean that, you surely do not want to write the sentence this way, because you misrepresent what you really want to tell. If anything different from this fact, okay? So, but again, even we have a bookstore and a coffee shop, that doesn't mean that we have two objects. We still have one compound object, which is a bookstore and coffee shop together. Oh, sorry, I dropped a here in this example. You should read a bookstore and a coffee shop. That's my bad. It cannot be a bookstore and a coffee shop, because in this case, the article A cannot be omitted before coffee shop. Otherwise, you really mean some strange entity like a combination of bookstore and a coffee shop, which is not abnormal, but we don't say it that way, right? Think about Barnes Noble. It's a big store, but usually it contains a coffee shop. But here, you should really have a here before coffee. Okay, but anyway, that's my typo. So here, if you diagram oral sentences, you will see that clearly it's just a simple sentence. You will put a lot of space into your horizontal line to contain all of them. This one goes even further and make this very complicated, but logically still very simple. Mr. Brown and his son own and manage bookstores and the coffee shops in Boston and outside New York. So they own a lot of businesses. And now it's unclear what this sentence exactly means. It can mean both in Boston and outside New York, two places. In each place, they must have both bookstores or coffee shop. At least each place has one coffee shop or multiple coffee shop. But can this also mean Boston only have bookstores, but New York only has coffee shops? Or Boston have both bookstores and coffee shops, but New York only have either bookstore or coffee shop? It's unclear. It's very kind of murky what exactly sentence means. It can be interpreted in multiple ways because you have just too much information in the sentences. To clarify, you better use some better structures either break this sentence into multiple two sentences to make it more clear. Say, Mr. Brown and his son on bookstores and coffee shops in Boston. They also on bookstores and coffee shops in outside New York, or something like that. But this is just way too much information. So if we diagram those things, should be easy. The first one, Miss Brown and his son on a bookstore. You have compound subject. Therefore, you join them together with a structure like this. A branch sound and subject. Okay, so Mr. Brown and his son, because we have two entities for the subject place. This is so complicated. We don't have enough space to put everything in, and we want to illustrate this compound structure. So what you do is that at that subject place, you branch it out into two things. That's why you have this little triangle here. Essentially, you have fork because you want to host two subject nouns here. Mr. Brown and son. This is a compound structure. How do we illustrate compound structure? We use a dashed line to connect the two and put the just conjunction and on that dashed line. Of course, this is vertical, so you turn it around and like this. So Mr. Brown and his son. Then those two merged into a single point, and this together should be thought as one horizontal place holding the logical subject. But because of so much information here, so we use this kind of just a complicated structure. But you think about it, it's really not that complicated. It just extends the basic idea, which is put a noun on a horizontal bar. So here, it just joined by this dashed line with the conjunction. Okay. The rest is just regular diagramming. Now, if we want to expand the verb to make it a compound verb, own and manage, how should we do that? We should do exactly the same thing, except that we want to branch out at the verb position. So the diagram looks like this. It just follow exactly the same idea. When you come to the verb, you branch out. One goes to own, one goes to manage, then you join them by a dashed line to illustrate this is the compound structure. So you join by this and dash line right there, similar to the subject case. And after that, you still need to go back to the main sentence, right? Because the object here is a bookstore. So after branching out, they merge back into the main line like that. Okay, so a bookstore, that's the object of this compound verb, so it doesn't change at all. So the next version, we'll see that a bookstore and a coffee shop. So in the object slot, it also, remember, those two vertical bars, the first vertical bar separating the subject and the verb still there, and the second bar separating the verb and the object still there. The only thing change is that think about this verb, for example, you just branched out and merged back, but logically it's the same thing as the original, a single flat black bar. Okay, now if we keep adding information into the sentence, a bookstore and a coffee shop. Again, there should be an A before coffee here. So you just do exactly the same thing. Okay, you branch out again because now you have a compound object. So therefore, you branch out just like in the verb case. Put bookstore right there and the coffee shop, and the diagram should go A beneath coffee shop and a bookstore. It should not be here. If you put it here, it really means that coffee shop and bookstore should be one entity. But I don't think we really mean that. So therefore, this A should have two copies, one beneath bookstore, one beneath coffee shop. Okay, but we are not just focusing on that point. The point is that how do we diagram such compound structures? You just branch out, merge back, branch out, merge back until you address all of those. And one last example is Boston, in Boston and New York, outside New York. So the last one needs a little bit um, just attention because this is an adverb, adjective, right? So where are those bookstores and the coffee shops? We want to tell where they are. Bookstores in Boston and outside New York. Coffee shops in Boston and outside New York. So clearly, you have two prepositional phrases serving as adjectives on bookstores and coffee shops. So you just diagram business as normal. In Boston, outside New York, you have two prepositional phrases right there. But how do we show the conjunction, the compound part? You do have an and connect them. However, the way to connect them is to connect at the backward, just a diagonal line segment, which holds the prepositions in and outside. So you connect there. So the and, the dashed and connect in and outside. So this diagram is quite artificially made up to illustrate how you will diagram such compound structures. So a lot of just extra stuff, but logically, this is still a simple sentence. Okay, it follows the original idea of how to diagram, but we just use such actual compound structure to make this work. Okay, we are way over time, 10 minutes past, so we'll stop here. Okay, so we have covered quite something today. I don't think this compound structure is that difficult to understand, but the earlier discussion on multi-word verbs, that's really tricky. Personally, I tell you, it took many years to understand the issue. I mean, it just, most people never realize such things at all. Okay, I think we will have a lecture. We should have a lecture next week. So I will see you next week. Bye.